Hi guys, this time for Victoria chapter, and talk is sent by Tanya Janka. So I pass on to Tanya. So just go ahead, Tanya.
Hi, thank you, Takaharu. I am going to share my screen so I can teach you all about purple teaming. Does that sound good? So I'm going to hit the share screen button.
Yep.
Okay, so it works best on a good computer. How am I going to show you which screen that I am showing?
Okay, so I'm gonna bring it up.
Okay, oh good, I get to choose. Okay, great. I was like a little bit nervous.
No, just go ahead.
Okay, good. All right, and now I'm going to start my presentation because it's way more interesting that way. And voila! Hello! Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to OWASP 24 hours. I'm so excited that all the chapter leaders came together to form this thing. I am not the only chapter leader for OWASP Victoria. There is Roberto and Christoph, and they are both amazing. And we have not had our first chapter meeting yet. We had one planned, and then the pandemic made that impossible. So we are currently trying to plan virtual meetups, but we are very, very excited, all three of us. Actually, the whole community is excited. But anyway, thank you for having me. So this talk is called Purple is the New Black, and it is about modern approaches to application security, and it is about purple teaming. So let's start. Okay, so we are going to talk today about what a red team is, which is offensive security. We're also going to talk about what a blue team is, which is defensive security. And then we're going to talk about what purple team is, which I like to call collaborative security. We're also going to talk about this. So this is what a lot of people see when they think of the word hacker. That's not what I see. They think of us as dangerous, like that we don't respect the law, etc. However, this is what I see. I see us protecting others. I see our profession as noble. I see us enabling everyone else where we work to get their jobs done securely, so that we can do our job to protect everything. This is what I see. This is what I think of when I think of hackers. So the mandatory about me slide. So I'm Tanya Janka. I like punk rock. I'm also known as She Hacks Purple on the internet. And yes, my hair has some purple in it. I am a purple teamer, and you will find out all about that in this presentation. I love OWASP. I love it. I'm part of the OWASP DevSlot project, the Victoria chapter, and I used to be part of the Ottawa chapter. I'm a big fan of OWASP. I'm also part of WOSEC, Women of Security. So if you want to meet lots of other women that work in security, this is a good way. And I am a security trainer and coach at shehackspurple.dev. And I teach about AppSec, and no one is surprised by that. Also, yes, I added this because I presented for the Ottawa chapter actually a few days ago, and I forgot to remove it. But anyway, I also love Ottawa. Okay, so this talk has 4 parts, and I'm going to tell you the 4 parts. I like to follow that public speaking rule where I tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I tell you, and then I repeat, I tell you what I told you. And the reason for this is so that you remember the stuff and you take it away. So 1, we're going to talk about collaboration, empathy, and advocacy, and how if you want to actually have a good AppSec program, you need those things. 2, we're going to talk about how to secure modern apps. So applications are changing. The dev and the ops team are bringing in all sorts of new technology. We have to secure that, which means we need to do new tactics, and we also need new tools. Then I'm going to briefly talk about automating boring stuff, because that is part of the Purple Team mantra. That is part of modern application security, automating all the things. And then we're going to talk about continuous learning, because the developers are doing it and the ops people are doing it, and we also have to do it if we are going to keep pace, because they move fast. All right, Let's get purple. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few definitions. I realize that you are watching the All OWASP All the Time channel, so you're probably like, oh, I already know this. That's okay, it'll only be like 2 minutes. Sit still, eat ice cream, you'll be happy. Okay, so what is AppSec, or application security? It is every and anything that you do to ensure that your software is secure. So that could be a secure code review. That could be hiring a penetration tester to come in and do a security assessment of your application. It could be you hearing on a podcast that this certain version of this framework that you're using is very insecure, and then making that conscious decision to upgrade to a newer version, which is not known to be secure. Any of those things. It doesn't need to be super formal, but you are still fighting the good fight. So what is DevSecOps? It is application security that has been adjusted for a DevOps environment. My friend Imran taught me this. He's like, Tanya, it's what we've always done. It's just AppSec. You just have to change. You have to fit yourself into what they're doing. And I was like, gosh, you're a brilliant guy. So what is Red Team? Red Team are the attackers or the offense. They do an adversarial style of security testing, which is usually against production systems. And they find real risk. So while threat modeling finds potential theoretical risk, red teams find real actual things that are wrong, and it's not a paper exercise. Penetration testing, red teaming, and writing exploits would all be part of the red team side of things. Also, like DDoS testing, like pressure, like stress performance testing could also be considered part of red team. Chaos engineering, yeah, that would also be part of red team. So what is blue team? They are our protectors. They are our defenders. They ensure our defenses exist and that they're effective. They are the ones that do the monitoring, the logging, the patching, the fixing of the bugs. They use tools and implement tools to shield us from abuse. So what is purple team? Actually, if we go back to blue team briefly, if you write code, it's your job to write secure code, and you are therefore doing blue team work. Anything that you are doing to try to defend the organization, if you are upgrading an old framework because you know it's insecure, all of those things count as blue team, and you are fighting the good fight with us. Okay, so let's talk purple. Collaboration, empathy, and advocacy, which I will explain. So what is purple team? So some people say it's blue team plus red team. So that's how I got my name, She Hacks Purple. It's because I was a pen tester, but I kept going to software developers' desks and helping them fix things and teaching them. And then I was like, oh, let's implement this tool. Let's do this. And everyone said, you know, you can't make up your mind. You keep doing blue team and red team stuff. And then I heard of the term purple team because someone told me that I was a purple teamer, and it just stuck. So red team plus blue team, maybe. I personally consider it as the collaborators, the cooperators, and the communicators. We teach, we provide tools, we enable, and we help. We are often known as the bridge between security and dev. This is us right in the middle. We're called AppSec. So I consider purple team application security as a whole like an umbrella with red and blue team underneath, because red teams do lots of really important work. They do testing and push boundaries and make sure that we fail gracefully if we are under fire. Well, blue teams make sure that we don't fail as much as possible and that we have great defenses. And both of them overlap within AppSec, or application security. Let's talk about what the purple team does. The type of stuff a purple team does as work. So they do consultations with software developers. They give guidance, assistance, enablement. They give the developers tools, resources, books, whatever they need. Sometimes they even write their own tools if they have to. They create documentation that is accessible and actually makes sense. I've seen a lot of security documentation where if you hand it to a developer, they don't know what it means, and that is totally unhelpful. But mostly they advocate for security and for developers. Okay, so I'm going to explain what advocacy is in a bit, but basically they make sure the things that are important to security and developers both have priority and that both are accounted for. But we'll talk about it a bit more in a few minutes. So yes, they need to hold the interests of the dev team and the security team both at equal levels. And this often can confuse some people. And we're gonna talk about ways that they can do this, but it's important that they advocate for both. If they just advocate for one, they will not do a good job. Okay, Purple Team is a modern approach to application security. Now let's talk about advocacy. Tanya, you're talking about soft skills, and I don't get it. I know women talk about soft skill things a lot at conferences, and usually I'm told I need to be less technical, but I've discovered that this is not stuff everyone knows, which means I need to tell people. So advocacy is showing support, public support for a policy or a stance, right? And so this means that we are advocating for what the security team wants to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems and the data that they are guarding, and the developers, which is to create kick-ass software, to make sure the software runs well, to make sure it does all the things the customer wants and could have ever dreamed of, right? And we need to advocate for both of those things at the same time. We need to show support for those things. So let's talk about ways that we can advocate and be successful. So there are actual principles for success, and we're gonna go through them. And I hope that you can think about this and ways that you could potentially bring one or two of these back to work. So the first one is independence. But what I look at this is self-service. Anything you can ever do to make something from the security team for developers or ops or any other team self-service, that is a giant win. As a software developer, I did not have lots of time to waste and then go chase around and look all over the wiki for things. If I wanted access to a tool, I wanted to go get the tool. I didn't want to wait weeks on end for it. I needed it now. Anything you can do to enable self-service is a huge win for you advocating for security and dev. Confidentiality. They need to be able to trust us. Now, I don't mean if you catch someone, stealing state secrets that you shouldn't tell. It's not what I mean. But if someone comes and reports something to you, I think it's pretty important that you then don't, in the next all staff meeting, say, Bob made that huge mistake and Alice, she's a terrible programmer. They need to be able to trust us and know we're not going to throw them under the bus. We need to have a human-centric approach. So I've had a lot of people question me on this. So I used to be a pen tester, and they would hire me to come in 1 or 2 weeks before something was supposed to go live. And then I would be giving them my report the day before they go live. And that would make for awful, awful situations for software developers. So then I started just giving them the results as soon as I got them. As soon as I had validated something, I would walk over to the developer's desk and tell them and say to them, if you want to issue an update with a fix, let me know and I'll retest it for you. And I'll take it off the report. So first of all, that made lots of good friends between me and them because they're like, yeah, less on the final report. Like I would show the security team, but the final report wouldn't say it because it was no longer vulnerable. And this meant that they could fix it weeks in advance. And so they weren't staying up all night. And that is a human-centric approach because having to stay up all night fixing bugs, no one would enjoy that. That sounds awful. So remember this when you create all the things for your program. Empowerment. Give them the tools, processes, and knowledge to go kick the crap out of everything that you want them to kick the crap out of. So give them a security tool. Make processes that are actually fast and effective and efficient. Teach them the things they need so that they can be awesome at their jobs. Empower them to make secure apps. Equal opportunity. I've worked at a bunch of places where they just don't want to give security training to everyone, or everyone's not allowed to have the security book or talk to the security team. This creates tiers and layers. This isn't as good. You won't hear every voice. You won't get to know all the things that are happening because there will be a filter in front of you. If you want to know what's going on, you need to let everyone be a part of security. Accountability. A lot of companies have problems with accountability. I used to work in the Canadian government, and I used to joke there was zero accountability for anything ever. And that leads to people not feeling like they need to do a good job. And if you want to advocate for something, there needs to be accountability for both security and the dev team. So if the security team doesn't answer any questions for weeks at a time, and this dev team decides to make the security decision by themselves, and there's bad consequences, the security team that made themselves repeatedly unavailable is actually the cause, because they tried to do the right thing and then they weren't able to, and the security team should admit fault and figure out a way that they can work so that they could have been available and they will be in the future. Accessibility. I've had a lot of people be like, no, that's not that important. It's important. You want to reach everyone, not most people. There are so many more people that have different issues that could use small changes to make things much more accessible to them. So for instance, if you're going to buy books for everyone, ask them if they would prefer an audio book, an ebook, or a physical book. Because some people have problems with one or the other, or they learn better from one or the other, or if there's training, if there's a possibility to do computer-based training, or let them do it at home, or let them do it at work, for instance, if they have small children who just run around screaming all the time. Maybe they would rather have like this small room to be able to do all the computer-based training on the weekend away from their family because there's just too much. When we ask, does anyone need anything for accessibility, we let them know it's okay to say it. So ask. Okay, empathy. It turns out that soft skills are actually life skills, but just not everyone bothered to develop them. And you will suck at being an application security professional if you don't have any soft skills. You just will. If you can't listen to developers and listen to the security team, you are going to be crappy at your job. Like if you can't listen to both sides, just be a pen tester. And I'm not saying that pen testers don't have empathy. I'm saying it's not nearly as important in that role as it is for application security. If you can't hear and listen and take it into account when you make your decisions, the other side of the equation, you're just not going to be good at this job. And in tech in general, like you just won't go as far if you can never see the other side of things, of what the other people are talking about and what they need. And if you, I'm not saying we need to run around and give hugs and pet every puppy we see. I'm saying that if you are unable to think outside yourself, you just won't go far. And you should really reevaluate if you're in that situation, because this is a skill that you can learn. All right. Idols. I feel our industry and the media and people in general are obsessed with hackers. I feel like they seem to think they're super important and like that they are the only job that exists in InfoSec. It feels like everyone thinks that that's all we do all the time and that they're the ones that everyone wants to have that job. And sometimes people disagree with me and they're like, that's not true, Tanya. We don't glorify pen testers. But I assure you that there are not this many movies about accountants. Everyone thinks that everyone in InfoSec is Mr. Robot, and that is really frustrating. And I think it's harming our industry. It results in a whole lot of places having, they're trying to like pen test their apps into being secure. I worked at a place and our entire security budget was just, or our entire application security budget was just to hire a pen tester at the very end of every project. And we did nothing else. And I was like, oh my God, we could have spent that money so much better and have way more secure apps. Because people think that's the only thing that is included. And basically hackers, it feels like they have the absolute best PR, and the rest of us need to get better at promoting like our jobs exist too, and we need people to do them as well, please. Oh, I feel that it's harming our industry. I feel like we're missing out on really awesome human beings that could join our field if we could talk about the other types of careers that are possible more often. I run this thing every Monday called Cyber Mentoring Mondays on Twitter. And basically, the first 6 months to a year, every single request was, I want to be a pen tester, I want to be a pen tester, I want to be a pen tester. But I started explaining to people who follow the hashtag, like, oh, do you mean like, do you want to try to be an incident responder? Or have you thought about doing secure code review? Or like maybe you could be a security architect for the cloud, and slowly people started branching into all these different types of areas of InfoSec and finding mentors in there once they figured out that there were so many different jobs. And I feel like our glorification of hackers and it's some kind of subculture, when really it's like there is a subculture around it, like DEF CON, it's fun, etc. But it's like, but that's not the job every day. And all sorts of people can do this job. They don't have to wear a black hoodie and look like Elliot. And I feel like a lot of people think they don't belong in InfoSec because of this subculture. And we need all the help we can get. So now I want to talk about, yes, this is an image that Ashley Willis, an amazing graphic designer, but also kick-ass tech lady, made for me when I worked at Microsoft. And it is me shining the bat symbol, the OWASP symbol, into the internet when I need help. So awesome. I love OWASP. So I want to talk about modern apps and what you need to know to secure them. So I'm not going to go in super deep, even though I want to, because I have promised to stay within my allotted amount of time, which is really hard for me because I am set to verbose. I was thinking I need a t-shirt that's just -V, and then like 10% of the population will get it. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the concept of zero trust. So zero trust is basically a pull away from what we used to do, which was just protect the perimeter. So way back in medieval times, we would build castles with giant walls, and we build a big gate around it and a moat and all these things to protect our perimeter. But if you were inside, we're like, you're cool. And so when we started building tech, we did our security the same way. We built a giant perimeter firewall. And then once you were inside, we just assumed you're cool. Unfortunately, it has turned out that that's not always the case. What this means is if someone is able to get past our perimeter, then they just had free range of everything and could go wild and take all our stuff. And that was very bad. And the other problem with this is that this made it very easy for insider threats. And when the information security technology started as an industry, I remember the stats were that something like 65% of all breaches were insider threats. And now that has changed because we don't do that anymore. So now things have changed and are moving towards zero trust. The idea that once you get in the perimeter, you still have to authenticate and authorize to everything, and that you only have access to things that you actually need access to, which is least privilege, right? So imagine I'm an app and I have a database. So that app can talk to that database, and the database administrator assigned that database server is allowed to talk to it and no one else. And between that app and that database is a service account. It's not Tanya's account. Even if Tanya's a software developer on that, it must be a service account. So that when we watch it, we can see, oh, that person is logging in the middle of the night. That's bad. Or if I switch teams, that I don't still have access to that database. So within your application, between applications, the way you configure things. So for instance, closing all 6,500 ports except for the 2 that you actually need to have open. And the way you design your network, always zero trust. Zero trust goes hand in hand with something called assume breach. So we are also trying to design things in a way such that we are assuming breach. So let's say you have a bug bounty or you have a coordinated disclosure program, and so you are accepting submissions of potential bugs with your software. The first thing you should do is go investigate well, first of all, figure out if it is an actual threat, if it's actually vulnerable or not. And then the second thing you should do is assume breach and go investigate to see if it's already been exploited, because the person that reported to you might be the 10th person to have found it. And so when we pair zero trust and assume breach together, you end up having a design that is really, really, really locked down, and it's quite nice. And it's much more secure than the old way. Up next, serverless and logic apps. So a logic app is a trigger. Basically, when something happens within your environment, usually public cloud environments, it gets triggered and then it calls a serverless app. That's all that logic apps do. Something happens and they're triggered and then they call the corresponding serverless app. Serverless apps are little tiny apps that are not sitting on a server all the time. They're not running, just waiting for things to happen. When the logic app calls it, it explodes a container, it launches itself, updates itself if it's supposed to, it runs to completion, and then it self-destructs, releasing all of those resources back into your ecosystem, meaning that it is very short-lived, it's ephemeral, and that means you might have a serverless app that only runs 9 minutes a month. So this greatly reduces your threat surface, or your attack surface. However, that doesn't mean you have no attack surface. And a lot of people forget that. So basically logic apps are triggers and serverless apps are just a little script or a little tiny app that only runs when it's called and then releases all the resources and disappears. It is important that we do not forget when we are using these that we still need to follow the same application security best practices that we always would. So you still need to authenticate and authorize. If that serverless app is going to go and call an API, it still needs to say, hi, I'm this app and I do have permission, go check the list. For some reason, when we adopt new technology, we tend to just totally forget that we still have to follow all the best practices. You can't forget yourself. So we still need to do those things. But wait, there's more. So here are the things that you still need to do. So you still need to monitor and log your functions. Like your serverless apps and your logic apps, I still want to know if they ran or not, and if they ran properly, and if something bad happened. I still want you to use secure coding conventions and best practices. I still want your data to be secured, and by that I mean encrypted in transit and at rest. But on top of this, modern improvements, things that are slightly different. I would like it if you would employ an API gateway so that nothing can call your serverless app unless it is coming through that gateway and it has been authorized, and then, that you have been authenticated and then you have been authorized. I want not only for your serverless and logic apps to be monitored and logged, I want that information to go into your SIM, your security information and event management system, so people in your SOC, your security operations center, can actually see what's going on. There is very little point in taking up tons and tons of space with having zillions of logs if no one is monitoring them. So please send that to the SIM so that people know what's going on from your security team. So the manage your secrets by putting them in a secret store actually applies to every single application, but I wanted to say it in this talk, so I just put it into this one. All secrets should be stored in a secret store. They should not be in your code. They should not be stored in a file on your desktop. A secret store is made specifically to be accessed programmatically by your DevOps pipeline, by your application itself, by service accounts. It's great. We should use that. Oops, wrong button. The next one on this list, so thank you for Sneak, because I got number 4 and 5 from them. So the way they worded it is deploy functions with minimal granularity. But what I read that as is your serverless app shouldn't do 55 different things so that it's actually running most of the time, in which case you just have an app. Just have an app then. It's not serverless. Serverless is to have one thing happen. And if you're gonna like boot it and kill it and boot it and kill it over and over again, that's a lot of extra energy. So it should just be used once in a blue moon because that's what it's actually needed for. And number 5, maintain isolated function perimeters. So what that actually means is if you have a serverless app, call another serverless app or an API or whatever else, it needs to authenticate and authorize, period. A lot of times, for whatever reason, we'll have an app and all the users that go to it are authenticated and authorized, and then it will call APIs and there'll be like nothing there. We'll just assume trust. Or it'll call a serverless app and it just boots up and the serverless app just trusts it. Or more often, a serverless app calls another serverless app, or a logic app calls a serverless, and there's no authentication or authorization. There's just trust. And what that means is Tanya, the pen tester, is going to come in and she's going to call all your serverless apps. She's going to talk to all your APIs. No authentication sounds great. All the rules still apply. So each serverless app, we need to apply zero trust and it needs to be its own island. Okay, next slide. Third-party component and library management, or sometimes called dependency management, which is also known as developer hell. I call this software supply chain security. So all the code in your app that your team did not write. So your framework, your components, your plugins, your libraries, every single piece that you've included, like your really cool front-end JavaScript framework, that is code your team didn't write, but you are still accepting the risk. Some people call this open source security, but it's not. It's third-party code security. It's supply chain security. It's all the ingredients that you're using to make your app, but that you don't have control over. Whether it's open source or closed source, I don't care. I want it to be secure. I suggest, if you can afford it, to use multiple tools. And by tools, I mean software composition analysis tools. What they do is they look at your stack and all the different things you've included in your app, and then they compare it against a known approved list that they have created through a crap ton of research and adding other lists from other groups. And then they look at it and then it's like yay or nay for each one of your things, and they will tell you why. Each company finds these lists and creates these lists in different ways, and that's why having 2 different tools would be great. I suggest scanning your repo once a week. This means that all your legacy code still gets attention, because you better believe it, stuff continues to become vulnerable. So it was vulnerable all along, but people discover that it was vulnerable, and that is the dangerous part. I also suggest that if you release your code in a release pipeline or a CI/CD pipeline, that you also scan it there, because you might be adding all sorts of new plugins and includes, and then you could just go to prod with something wildly insecure if you don't also check this in your pipeline. Awesome. I'm going to take just a drink for a second because I've been talking really fast and I want that to digest. Okay, online storage, which I refer to as the crown jewels. So when Amazon started, they were the first public cloud, and they made these things called S3 buckets where you could store things. And at first, the defaults were not that secure, and then lots of bad things ensued. Amazon, Azure, GCP, Heroku, all of them learned from this mistake, and now the defaults are really quite secure. But there's way more we can do to make sure that this is secure, because this is where we store our data and our files and things that we probably don't want people to see most of the time. So you can create defaults for your organization that are even more locked down than the defaults provided by your cloud provider by creating templates and creating policies that enforce those templates. And by policies, I don't mean stuff written on a website that your employees are supposed to read and then follow. I mean a computerized check that tells you, hey, that specific bucket is not following this policy. You need to go look at this now. I also believe in classification of data. I used to do quite a bit of incident response, more than I want to admit. And if the data was not classified, so if I did not know, oh, is this unclassified, like public knowledge? Is this sensitive? Is this personally identifiable information? Is this secret? Is this top secret? If I didn't know, I had to assume the worst. And that sucks. That spells Tanya having more gray hair. And don't get me wrong, I look distinguished, but I don't want to have all these big chunks of gray because people aren't classifying their data. I want to have it for good reasons. I also believe that you should turn on monitoring for these assets, and that you should also, so part of the monitoring should be who's accessing it. So only service accounts should be accessing your storage, not people accounts. So Tanya shouldn't be going in and changing all the things. It should be that application service account. Service accounts are identities within your network that do things on behalf of computers, not on behalf of people. And so a service account should be accessing it. And so you should monitor who's accessing it, should monitor the file integrity, you should monitor if someone's port sniffing, and you should have alerts that go to the people that work in your SOC. There's no point in monitoring and paying all the bills to have the logging and the monitoring if there aren't any alerts and no one's following up. If at all possible, create automated responses. This is a thing you can do in public cloud. In Microsoft's cloud, it is called a playbook. So basically you create a logic app that triggers like on these alerts, and then you create a serverless app and you write whatever you want it to do. It's pretty sweet. You can do it in Amazon as well, but it's just basically like you attach a serverless app, like a Lambda function, to these alerts and have them triggered when these alerts go off. And I already said the last thing. So we are good, and you now all know the basics on how to secure online storage. Next, containers and orchestration. So way back in the day, we had giant, huge servers, which we called bare metal. We would give them names. We would have them for a long time, and each one would host one app. That took forever. That was slow. They were loud. They took up lots of space. One day, several brilliant humans invented virtualization. And then we had virtual machines. Virtual machines are awesome. It was an operating system, and it would run an app in the operating system, and you could have a whole bunch of them running on the same server. And all of us rejoiced. It was great. But then more smart people came along and invented containers. And containers are just the subset of an operating system, the smallest parts that you need to run your application and nothing more. So while a virtual machine might need 4 gigabytes of memory and 4 gigabytes worth of hard drive space, a container could be 4 megs of memory and 4 megs of hard drive space. It's amazing. And then you can have a zillion of them on one server. Awesome. However, having so many different containers running meant we needed to have orchestration. So orchestration, also known as Kubernetes, there are other products, but they've sort of cornered the market. basically manages all the containers. So they'll start them, stop them, give them more memory, just manage all the things about them and make sure they start and stop and do whatever they're supposed to do. And so imagine orchestration like the director of an orchestra telling all of them, directing everyone and making sure everyone knows what they're supposed to play. That's what orchestration is, and containers are just the tiniest part of the operating system needed to run what you want to do. So what do you need to know from a security perspective? Follow the same network security stuff that you should do, the same cloud security stuff, the same network security stuff. They're little tiny operating systems. So that means you configure them so that they're locked down. You're going to need to learn new configurations because it's different than virtual machines. But you still have to harden them just like you would a virtual machine. And there's new tools to do that. And you need to learn these new tools. There are new types of vulnerabilities to watch out for. So as soon as someone invented a virtual machine, someone else was trying to figure out how to break out of it so they could get onto the other virtual machines, of course, right? You put someone in a cage, they try to get out of the cage. So that's the same thing with containers. People are always trying to break out of containers. So you need to watch out for these types of vulnerabilities, and they will be different than virtual machine vulnerabilities. You also specifically need to protect who can create or edit containers. It's very important that the person that's running the orchestration is the person you trust who's supposed to be doing that and not a malicious actor. But basically, similarly to virtual machines, you want to scan everything that can be scanned. You want to verify that your configuration is as hardened as it possibly could be. You want to patch regularly, or what a lot of people do is they just destroy the container and then just replace it with an updated container, whichever one you want to do. Just make sure you're up to date and apply zero trust to your design. And then you'll be good. Basically, like that's the general overall gist of the things that you need. There's more details, there's more specifics, like you need to learn these new tools, but a lot of it is similar. But for some reason, people move to containers and orchestration. They're so excited, they forget to do these basic things. We need you to still have good security hygiene. Next, APIs and microservices. An API is a web app that does not have a front end. There is no GUI. It's all the same stuff that runs on the server, except for just other applications or services call it and ask it to do stuff. So there's just no front end. And a microservice is an API that only does one single thing. So for instance, if I want to be able to give my postal code and then have the rest of my address come back, just doing that one thing could be a microservice. And then every application where I work would all be able to call that one microservice that does that instead of rewriting the code over and over. So what do I need to know to secure APIs and microservices? You need to do all the same AppSec that you would normally do. The only thing you don't need to do is stuff that has to do with the GUI, like output encoding. That's the only thing you don't have to do. You still need to do input validation. You still, if you're talking to a database, need to use parameterized queries. You still need to authenticate and authorize and all of that goodness. But sometimes people forget because it's new tech, but please don't. It's really important. But there's more. There's more. So, plus, APIs and microservices have this thing called service mesh that you can use. So just like there's orchestration for containers that manages everything, service mesh manages everything. It can start and stop and manage access and encrypts everything. It's an infrastructure layer, so you don't have to change your code, but it just kind of manages all the APIs for you. It's quite nice. I believe in standardization of your APIs and microservices. There should be a standard where you work and a template that people start with so that everyone follows the same one. This makes testing so much easier, and testing these is hard. So anything we can do to make it less hard is good. I believe in strict linting of calls. to ensure that you are following the protocol and the definition of the API. So linting is like grammar police for your code. You basically, how do I put this? Basically, it checks to make sure you're not taking any poetic license, you're not deleting things on a put request, you're using a delete request for that, etc. Throttling and resource quota. So this is a great thing that a service mesh could do for you. Throttling means as someone is pulling more and more resources or calling something over and over and over again, it will slow you down. You know, because no one tries to log into something 100 times in 1 second. That is a bot. So if you slow that down, that will annoy the bots. And resource quotas will just cut you off when you've used too much. And so if someone has logged in 10 times in 1 minute, then let's say you're only allowed 10 times in 24 hours, then you have to wait. That certainly does screw up someone's attack against you. And this is a great way to help fend off bots. You have to talk with the business about what realistic throttling and resource quotas are. This will be a negotiation, trust me. But adding these is really, really important for stopping API abuse. We should always authenticate and then authorize. So figure out who you're talking to and then decide what the things are they are allowed to have access to. If you authorize someone and then authenticate, it might be too late for you because you might have already let them in a little bit. When we give error messages and there is no GUI, this means there is no person. You should not be giving verbose error messages. Computers don't make typos. So if someone is calling your API with a malformed request, that is an attacker. You should be logging that and alerting upon it unless you are in testing phase. So do not tell them, oh, this is the format, because then you are helping me as a pen tester make a better attack. And then I'm happy because I look cool to whoever hired me, but then you're sad because you're fixing bugs. Also, this goes for every app. You should make an approved list for all HTTP verbs or methods that your app actually uses, and then you should block the rest. So you should not allow the rest of the verbs to be executed on your server unless they are a part of your application. So I think there are 12 different methods, sometimes called verbs. Most people just use get, put, and sometimes delete. Block the rest. Okay, modern tooling. So basically we have 2 more super technical slides left and then more or less technical slides. So if you're like, I'm having trouble, this is a lot, I'm sorry I melted your brain. But this is OWASP, right? Like, so modern tooling. I am not going to tell you about brands of tools or products that you should buy. I'm going to talk to you about genres and types of tools so that you know that they exist, because you don't know what your opportunities are and what your options are if you don't know that they exist. So first, IAST. This is a new, more modern type of AppSec tool. It stands for Interactive Application Security Testing. It is basically a binary that goes inside your application. And then as people interact with the app, it performs dynamic and static analysis of the application and provides feedback, i.e. vulnerability information, in real time as it's used. This is really good to run during quality assurance testing, during unit testing, and especially while it's in prod. RASP, Runtime Application Security Protection. This is like a shield for your app. It's a bit like a WAF, a web app firewall, in that it focuses on protecting and blocking bad malicious behavior. However, while a WAF lives out on your load balancer or your web server, a RASP is another binary, just like IAST, and it goes inside your application and it analyzes in real time the input to your application. Then it usually calls out to the cloud and does some machine learning and artificial intelligence stuff to tell your app, no, this is no good, you don't want to accept this input. File integrity monitoring, which goes hand in hand with application control tools. So file integrity monitoring, make sure that the files that you list cannot be changed for any reason. So system files, right? And then application control tools are an approved list of applications that are allowed to run on that server, and everything else is blocked. So when you have these two running, if malware gets onto your computer, the first thing it tries to do is it tries to start running. And then the application control tool is like, you're not on my list. No way, buddy. So then the next thing that the malware tries to do is rename itself to be a system file. So it will be on the approved list. And the file integrity monitoring is like, nope, not happening. And that's pretty awesome. There are also cloud native tools created specifically only for the cloud. They're pretty awesome. And you are quite often, if they are provided by your cloud provider, you're actually already paying for them in your terms of service. So you should take advantage. The next thing is, so I worded this poorly, it's security tools that are designed specifically to be used in a pipeline. A lot of the well-known security tools are really amazing and they stand on their own, but they don't do so well in a pipeline. And so some of them are releasing new versions, but there are so many cool new tools made only to be used in a pipeline. You should check that out. If you're using public cloud, I strongly suggest you take advantage of customizable alerts and automated responses whenever possible. And brand new to the scene is application inventory tools. Having a current inventory of all of your applications is difficult, and there are now some automated tools that will help you find them, and that is glorious. Now I'm going to talk about modern tactics. Takaharu, I know I'm going a bit late and might go through question period, but I promise to end 1 minute before the hour, one way or another. Okay, so adding tools to your DevOps pipeline, adding security tools, this is a new tactic. Creating negative unit tests, so copying developers' unit tests and then adding security payloads into it so that you can do regressive security testing. That's pretty cool. Breaking security activities into smaller amounts of time, so sprints, so that you can make sure that you fit into their timeline, turning penetration test results into unit tests, tuning your tools for efficiency and automation, doing automated repository scanning, so your code's just sitting there, you should be doing everything you can with it, etc., etc., etc. So, I would love to talk to you about DevSecOps all day, but I can't. It's my favorite topic, but basically part of it is adding security tooling to your pipelines. It's ensuring that you give developers very fast security feedback and making every moment a teaching moment. I would love to tell you more, but this talk isn't about that. But there's a link here in case you want to see a talk about that. And also, I know this isn't a talk about cloud security, but lots of apps live in the cloud. And if you are going to be an application security professional at a place that is using the cloud, I feel that you absolutely need to learn the basics of the security of your cloud so that you can do your job properly. And again, I have other talks about cloud security because I'm obsessive about these things, but you can't not learn it. Life will be very hard for you if you don't. So here is a summary of the modern apps part of this talk, and then we are going to quickly talk about automating, and then we're going to wrap up. So I hope you have taken a screenshot because I have stalled long enough. Automate the boring stuff. We learned to code so we would never have to do things twice. So, toil. This is the type of stuff that you need to automate. You want to automate every single thing that you possibly can to avoid toil, because this is where we, as humans, make a crap ton of mistakes, and those mistakes sometimes become security incidents. Automation also means we get to have more fun jobs. We do automation, so via DevSecOps pipelines. We can create a parallel pipeline and add lots of really long slow tests to it. so that we know it runs every week, whether we have time to look at the results or not. We can use infrastructure as code and add security into it to ensure that the infrastructure as code is creating secure infrastructure. We can do security as code, which is real and in production in many places. I just added like automation of AppSec. But basically the reason why we do this is so that we can spend less time handling fires and all of that crap and instead be doing proactive work, because that is the super fun work. And we want to have fun at work. Okay, less toil, more triumph. So now we're going to talk about basically continuous learning and how you are all doing that right now. So this whole OWASP 24/7 thing is us teaching each other and teaching the public about security. So very quickly, because we have very little time left, you need to keep learning or you will be left behind. Every single moment is a teaching moment, whether it's good or it's bad. As a security professional, you should be teaching. You can give micro lessons, lunch and learns. You can buy computer-based training. I realize you're thinking, Tanya's a great presenter, so it's easy for her. I sucked when I started. I was awful. It took a long time to get good. Developer and operations people are going to continue to bring in new tech. And if you don't learn it, you will be left behind. And yes, they're doing it behind your back right now, probably. You can create learning calendar blocks for self-training. You can support job shadowing, mentoring, on-the-job learning. You can share information with other teams and share wins, share when good things happen too, right? I am a big fan of metrics-based training. So for instance, finding out what the top 3 things are that you have problems with and then doing lots of training on those to try to reduce those and then take measurements and see if your training worked. Building your own training specific for your own organization. I have a silly story that I would normally tell, but I don't really have time. But basically, someone went to a conference and saw my DevSecOps talk and then thought I invented DevOps because they had not had training in over 10 years and had never heard of DevOps. And although that's really funny, and I think it's cool that one person thinks I'm like the god of tech, in reality, this means that this person has been missing out and making poor technical decisions for a really long time. And that's sad for everyone. So, conclusion. I am very tired of having everyone think of this guy when they think of our industry. This is what a hacker looks like. This is my friend Steph. She's awesome. This is what a hacker looks like. Takaharu is what a hacker looks like. Every single person that you're going to see on these talks throughout these 24 hours is what a hacker actually looks like. They look like you and me. They look like people who are noble, who want to protect the public from insecure software and insecure systems and malicious actors. That's what a hacker looks like. And we need to redefine what this is, so that we can attract everyone to our industry instead of just the small subset of people. We need all the help we can get, and we need to improve our image if that's going to work. Okay. Also, please be nice to developers. Be nice to all of IT. They are our friends and they are our allies, and we can't do this without them. So please don't treat them like they're idiots, because they're definitely not. We need them on board more than you realize. So that's the end of my rant. And now I want to invite all of you to join OWASP. If you haven't already, please join your local chapter. Everyone there, trust me, you'll make friends. If you are a woman or identify as a woman, WOSEC, Women of Security, welcomes you. We'd love to meet you. We're doing lots of cool things online right now because of the pandemic. But if you want to meet lots of cool women, this is a way. And I invite all of you to participate in Cyber Mentoring Monday, every Monday on Twitter, to answer someone, or the reverse, to ask for help. And lastly, me, I am a resource. I would love to help you with all the things and teach you all the stuff. And with that, I would like to thank you so much for coming to my talk today. We have learned all the things. And thank you. My slides are already up on the internet if you want to see them. It says bit.ly/. purple slides. So you can't see it because of the emblem, but it's purple slides. And then you can find these slides there. Thank you, Takaharu. I'm sorry I went
Thank
right
you very
to
much.
the
So next chapter is coming up, so I have to leave. So
yeah, that's okay. I will leave. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Sorry I went over.
Thank you.
今ね、高原さんが作業してるのがね、まだね、ビクトリアのやつに放送されてます。
おっと。